Hey nerds, what's up? I'm back. Today, we're diving into something that's gonna blow the minds of all X-Men and mutant fans out there. Have you ever wondered how many mutant movies and shows could have been made? Well, many projects, whether films or TV shows, never saw the light of day. Why? Well, either because of rights issues or due to failed movies that didn't make the cut. We almost had a Magneto movie, a Nightcrawler movie, and even a Civil War adaptation. But with mutants instead of the Avengers. Curious yet? That's right, nerds. Over 20 projects are stuck in limbo, canceled for all kinds of reasons. Some we kinda knew weren't gonna happen. Others, well, they never even made it past the drawing board. So let's take a look at the 24 mutant movies and shows that never came to be. And I promise, some of them are gonna surprise you. First, Franklin Richards movie, Son of Mr. Fantastic. The first canceled project on our list is a movie about Franklin Richards, the son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Back in 2017, Fox announced they were working on an animated film focused on this powerful mutant. They even considered a live-action version for a while, with Blue Sky Studios, the folks behind Ice Age, on board. Plot: the film would have followed Franklin and his sister Valeria, with Franklin's powers allowing him to shape and even destroy realities. One version had him as the same Franklin from the 2015 Fantastic Four movie, but that idea never came to fruition. Why it got canceled. After Disney bought Fox and focused on the X-Men and Avengers universes, the project was shelved. The concept was super ambitious, and Fox was more focused on rebooting the X-Men. Second solo Namor movie. Who wanted to see Namor in action? We saw him as the antagonist in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, but a Namor solo movie had been in the works for years, since around 2008 actually. Universal Studios had a bunch of scripts and plans ready, but the movie never happened. Marvel was also preparing a solo movie for the Submariner, one of their oldest characters, but because of shared rights with Universal, it never happened at the beginning of the MCU. That only changed recently when it seemed like the character's rights returned to Marvel, and he finally appeared in the MCU. Plot: the movie would have explored Namor's origins, his alliances, and his struggles against surface dwellers. Not much else is known, since most of this movie fell into the abyss. Why it got canceled. There's not much known about why it was canceled, but it might still be in the planning stages. The rights to Namor are divided between Marvel, Universal, and even Fox. Since the character also belongs to the Fantastic Four universe as a villain, Marvel likely doesn't plan on giving him a solo movie anytime soon. Third Gambit, solo movie. Who remembers the Gambit project with Channing Tatum set to play the lead role? This guy went through a lot. The movie had been in development for years, but never came to fruition. We're talking about over 10 years of work that went nowhere. Even though Gambit appeared in Deadpool and Wolverine, his solo movie never happened. Plot: the film would have focused on Gambit, a thief turned hero, blending action and romance, with a focus on his mysterious past and his love life with Rogue. The film was also set to be rated R, and would have had an ultra-violent, Deadpool-like comedy vibe. Why it got canceled. Constant delays, script changes, and contract issues led to the project being postponed and eventually canceled. Fox's buyout by Disney also affected the future of Gambit, like many other films on this list. The Disney deal had some ups and downs for fans, that's for sure. 4. Power Pack, the Young Mutants movie. In a more kid-friendly project, Marvel planned a movie about the Power Pack, a group of young mutants with special powers. This almost happened during Marvel's financial crisis, and it was supposed to feature some of the company's lesser-known characters, with a vibe similar to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air from the 90s. There's not much info on this one, as these characters were B-list, and the project was supposed to be released straight to DVD or as a TV special. Plot: the Power Pack was made up of 4 siblings with different abilities: controlling gravity, teleportation, manipulating molecular density, and shooting energy blasts. They would fight villains while dealing with family issues. Why it got canceled? The project got shelved due to Marvel's financial struggles in the 90s, as well as the company's impending bankruptcy. They ended up focusing on more popular franchises like Spider-Man and X-Men. Honestly, it's probably for the best. Imagine a 90s Power Pack movie. 5. Exiles, multiverse movie. This was one of Fox's most ambitious concepts. Exiles was a film about a team of mutants traveling between different realities to save the multiverse. Keep in mind, this was way before the MCU even thought about using the multiverse in their films. Plot: the movie would have featured alternate versions of mutants, like a savage, lone Wolverine from a reality where all the X-Men were dead, and a rogue from another timeline. They would team up to save the multiverse. Why it got canceled? The concept was too complex for its time, and the high production costs for adapting such a complicated story were just too much. This movie was envisioned in the early 2000s when the multiverse wasn't even a thing in mainstream cinema. But the idea was cool, right? 6. X-Force, Deadpool and Cobra movie. Speaking of Deadpool, X-Force was a movie focused on this team of more aggressive mutants, including Deadpool and Cable. This idea had been floating around for a while, originally meant to be developed around the same time as X-Men Origins, Wolverine, but that movie's flop killed the project. After Deadpool 2 came out, Fox commissioned a new script for X-Force, which was meant to be Deadpool 3. Plot: the movie would follow the X-Force team, who operate in more brutal ways, solving problems that the X-Men can't, with characters like Cable, Domino, and Deadpool trying to prevent global threats. Why it got canceled? Even though Deadpool was a hit, the project was canceled after Disney took over Fox. Marvel wanted to steer X-Force in a direction that was closer to the Avengers films, so Deadpool's 3rd film ended up being a Deadpool and Wolverine team-up movie. In this case, I guess it worked out. 7. X-Men Origins, Magneto. X-Men Origins, Magneto was in development and was supposed to focus on Magneto's youth, covering his time during the Holocaust and his evolution into the villain we know. The script was practically done, but the project was canceled. Plot: the movie would have shown Eric Lenser's life, from his childhood during the Holocaust to his transformation into Magneto. It would have also explored how he met Charles Xavier and formed the X-Men. Sounds familiar, huh? Why it got canceled? After the flop of X-Men Origins, Wolverine, Fox got cold feet about doing more origin stories and decided to scrap it. But for the best, really? X-Men First Class ended up using much of the same script and gave us one of the best X-Men films. 8. X-Men Dark Phoenix 2. Unlike the previous movie, this one might actually be a blessing in disguise that it didn't happen. After the failure of Dark Phoenix, Fox planned a sequel to try and fix the first movie's mistakes. We don't know much about the sequel, but it had a few working titles over the years. Originally, X-Men Dark Phoenix was meant to be split into 2 parts, but when Disney bought Fox, they decided to rush out just the first part. There were even plans to include the Skrulls as villains, but that got scrapped because the rights were tied to Captain Marvel. Plot: the sequel would have followed Jean Grey, learning to control the Phoenix Force, and included an invasion by the Skrulls, tying it into Fantastic Four, 2015. Thankfully, that never happened. Why it got canceled? With Disney's acquisition of Fox, Marvel reevaluated its plans for the X-Men and canceled all ongoing projects, including this one, turning Dark Phoenix into the final X-Men movie under Fox's banner. Ninth Legion, Season 4. Switching gears to TV shows, let's talk about Legion, which had a totally unique and psychedelic style, but was canceled after its third season. The show followed Professor X's son trying to control his powers. It was one of the best X-Men shows, very mature and deep. Plot. The series explored David Haller, Charles Xavier's son, and his mutant power to control realities and minds, while dealing with a mental illness that made him uncontrollable. Why it got canceled. Despite being critically acclaimed, the show didn't have enough viewers to justify a fourth season, and the Fox-Disney merger also played a role in the cancellation. 10. The Gifted, Season 3. Another mutant show, The Gifted, followed a group of mutants trying to survive in a world where they're hunted. It was canceled after its second season, though a third season was planned, and it was supposed to take place in a future similar to Days of Future Past. Plot. The series followed the Strucker family, who discovers their kids have mutant powers. They join an underground movement of mutants fighting against the Sentinels. Why it got canceled. Despite a promising start, the show couldn't maintain its audience and was canceled by Fox, who was re-evaluating its projects after the Disney merger. Still, I highly recommend checking it out. It had a lot of potential. 11th, Wolverine and the X-Men, animated TV series. Another interesting project was the Wolverine and the X-Men animated series, which had plans for a continuation. This series existed in the same universe as The Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and had two spin-off movies, Hulk vs. Thor and Hulk vs. Wolverine, which were released straight to DVD. Plotted. The animated series followed Wolverine and other X-Men members as they dealt with threats from the Sentinels, the destruction of their mansion, and the loss of their colleagues. It had a darker tone than most X-Men cartoons and was focused on Wolverine, who takes the lead after Professor X dies. Why it got canceled. Even though it was well received, the show didn't attract enough of an audience to continue, and it ended after just one season without a proper conclusion. 12th, Dazzler, movie. Back to the movies, one of the strangest projects on this list is the Dazzler movie. Dazzler is a mutant who can convert sound into light, creating amazing visual spectacles. The movie was planned for the 80s, which fits with her whole pop star persona. Plot. The Dazzler movie would have focused on her journey as both a pop star and a mutant, balancing her celebrity life with her superhero duties. Not much else is known about the story. Why it got canceled. The project, conceived in the 80s, was never made due to production issues and lack of interest from studios, especially considering the musical trends of that time. The director also lost interest and quit the project. 13. X-Men vs. Fantastic Four plus Daredevil, movie. This idea would make fans lose their minds. A movie of X-Men vs. Fantastic Four plus Daredevil. There are actually two versions of this idea, one from 2007 and a more recent one. Originally, Fox wanted to make a film that was a crossover between the X-Men, Daredevil, Spider-Man, which was still owned by Sony at the time, and the 2003 Hulk, which was under at Universal. This version of the film never happened, but it would have been like a pre-Avengers movie, uniting all these characters. Sources also say that the Punisher was supposed to be in it, a character that Fox also owned back then. This idea never got off the ground, mostly because of rights issues, since some of those characters weren't even owned by Fox. The second version of this idea was much more recent and pretty much confirmed by Fox. They wanted to bring together the 2015 Fantastic Four with the X-Men from X-Men First Class. The idea was to adapt Civil War, having both teams fight it out and even bring in the Skrulls at the end. Fox even officially mentioned they wanted to unite these two teams. Plot. The battle kicks off when Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, accidentally causes a huge explosion in Manhattan while trying to capture the villain Molecule Man. The heroes would then split into two teams, fighting for their own beliefs, bringing about a showdown between Wolverine and Reed Richards. In the end, the teams would join forces to defeat the Skrulls, who would invade Earth, adapting the Secret Invasion storyline. Why it got canceled. Basically, the 2015 Fantastic Four movie was such a disaster that Fox didn't want to try to combine the teams. Plus, a year later, Marvel did their own version of Civil War in the MCU, making Fox's idea feel a little irrelevant. 14. X-Men 4 and X-Men 5. After the success of the first X-Men movies, there were plans for sequels, X-Men 4 and X-Men 5, but nothing ever came of it, and we don't even know if they were officially considered, as they were just rumors at the time. There was an idea to reunite the first-class X-Men with the original team, and there was even talk of a movie called X-Men: The End, showing the final days of the original X-Men and passing the torch to the first-class team. Plot. These movies would have continued the X-Men story, introducing new villains, adventures, and dilemmas for the mutants, bringing the two X-Men teams together. But the idea never got off the ground. Why it got canceled. The failure of X-Men. The Last Stand led Fox to abandon the plans for the sequels for a while. But after the success of Days of Future Past, Fox saw potential in these crossovers and started thinking about bringing the old mutants back. However, Disney's purchase of Fox changed everything, and those plans were scrapped. 15th Hallfire, TV series, 2015. Imagine a TV show about Emma Frost, but not the good Emma, you know? We're talking about the dark version of her, with lots of power, political manipulation, and of course, a sharp mind. This show would have dived into the mutant world behind the scenes, with Emma playing her power game, dealing with betrayals, and controlling minds. Think of House of Cards in the X-Men universe, but with more psychic action. It would have been tense, intriguing, and way more adult. Plot of Hallfire would have been a series focused on Emma Frost, the mutant villain with the ability to read and maybe control minds. The show would have explored political intrigue, mental manipulation, and power plays in the mutant world. You'd constantly be wondering, is she a villain or a victim? Why it got canceled. Sadly, this project got scrapped before it even got started. Fox announced it in 2015, but quickly pulled the plug. The execs weren't convinced a show focused on Emma Frost would work, especially after the failure of The Gifted. Plus, when Disney bought Fox, they rethought everything X-Men related, and Emma Frost's series was one of the casualties. 16. X-Men First Class 2. Remember X-Men First Class from 2011? The one that rejuvenated the franchise and brought a young Professor X and Magneto into the 60s during the Cold War? Well, the plan was to continue that journey, showing the young mutants facing new threats while trying to figure out how to be a team. It was one of those films that, in addition to heroes and villains, really focused on the political and social context of the time. Plot: X-Men First Class 2 would have continued the story of the mutants in the 60s, focusing on the maturation of the team and the ongoing conflict between Professor X and Magneto. They'd be facing new threats while trying to become a more cohesive team. The idea was to dive deeper into the relationships between the mutants and show how the political climate of the time influenced their decisions and actions. Why it got canceled. The main reason this sequel got canceled was due to Fox changing its focus for the X-Men franchise. After X-Men, The Last Stand, and the attempt to reboot with Days of Future Past, Fox decided to go in a different direction with the films, leaving First Class 2 behind. Later, movies like Dark Phoenix and X-Men Apocalypse showed how the focus shifted away from this kind of approach. 17. New Mutants 2 and 3 Trilogy. Released in 2020, The New Mutants was something totally different from what we were used to seeing in superhero movies. A psychological horror story within the X-Men universe. It was about young mutants kept in a psychiatric hospital, not really knowing what was happening to them. It had that 80s horror vibe and was a constant suspense trip. Plot: after the release of The New Mutants, the idea was to expand the story into 2 more movies, The New Mutants 2 and The New Mutants 3. The sequels would have explored the journey of these young mutants, diving deeper into their abilities and challenges as they face new threats. The horror tone would have continued, with a stronger focus on the psychological evolution of the characters, blending action and fear in even more intense ways. Why it got canceled. The first movie had a troubled production with multiple delays, and that didn't help its box office performance. When Disney bought Fox, the plans for a New Mutants trilogy were completely scrapped. Disney wanted to integrate the X-Men into the MCU, and with the movie bombing at the box office and with critics, it didn't make sense to continue the sequels. The whole project was just wiped out in favor of a full reboot. 18. X-Men Fear the Beast. Beast is one of the most interesting X-Men characters, right? He's super smart, with the heart of a lion, but he's also full of inner dilemmas. Imagine a movie completely focused on him, exploring the conflict between his human side and the beastly side he carries. This would have been a psychological thriller, with Beast facing a monstrous threat that might be connected to his own nature more than he realized. Plot: X-Men Fear the Beast would have focused on Beast, the mutant with an animal appearance but a brilliant mind. The plot would have shown him grappling with his own internal struggles while facing a monstrous threat tied to his mutant nature. It would have been an action and psychological suspense movie where Beast fights not just against a villain, but against his own identity. A story of self-discovery packed with tension and intense battles. Why it got canceled. Despite the interesting concept, the project didn't move forward. After Dark Phoenix's failure and Disney taking over, Fox restructured the X-Men franchise. The focus shifted to a more cohesive MCU reboot, and Fear the Beast was left behind. 19th, Multiple Man, James Franco movie. Imagine James Franco playing Multiple Man, a mutant who can create multiple copies of himself. The story would have been a deep psychological study, with the character struggling to manage the confusion of having so many versions of himself running around at once. It would have been a story filled with drama, tension, and existential questions, in a style similar to Fight Club. Plot: the Multiple Man movie would have explored Jamie Madrox, the mutant who creates copies of himself, and the psychological toll that power would take. Imagine having multiple versions of yourself doing things you don't agree with. How do you manage that responsibility? The plot would dive into existential issues about identity, with plenty of action scenes involving Madrox's copies fighting bad guys. Why it got canceled. The film never made it past the concept stage, even though it had a solid cast, James Franco included. When Disney acquired Fox, all the X-Men projects got re-evaluated, and Multiple Man was absorbed into the MCU. The solo movie idea was scrapped in favor of incorporating him into the larger universe. 20. Omega Red movie. Omega Red is one of the most badass villains in the X-Men universe. A Russian mutant with deadly tentacles, he has a long history of conflict with Wolverine. This movie would have been an action thriller filled with fights and chases. Plot: the Omega Red movie would have focused on the villain's dark past and his battles with Wolverine. The plot would involve a race against time, with Wolverine trying to stop Omega Red's plans while they engage in epic battles. it would have been a gritty, action-packed story with constant tension. Why it got canceled. The project never moved forward. Fox wasn't too keen on making standalone villain films, and when Disney took over, they completely changed their approach to the X-Men. Omega Red's character was integrated into the MCU, and the standalone film was shelved. 21st Alpha Flight. Imagine a movie about a team of Canadian superheroes. Alpha Flight was a team of mutants with unique powers, including Aurora, Puck, and Sasquatch, battling a global threat. It would have had that team dynamic, like the Avengers, but with a Canadian twist, something fresh for the audience, and it would have been rated R, with a vibe similar to the Suicide Squad by James Gunn. Plot: Alpha Flight would have focused on this team of Canadian superheroes, dealing with a major global threat. The film would have explored the Canadian context, giving the characters a unique identity. It would have been packed with action and epic moments, but with a more personal touch, exploring the dilemmas of a lesser-known team. Why it got canceled. Despite the cool idea, the film never came to be. Alpha Flight didn't have the same popular appeal as other superhero teams, and Fox ended up focusing on other franchises. Disney's acquisition of Fox and the shift in focus for the X-Men meant this project was abandoned. 22nd, Kitty Pryde, solo movie. The Kitty Pryde movie was an attempt to give the beloved character, also known as Shadowcat, her own solo film. The plot would have focused on Kitty, one of the most adored mutants, dealing with her intangibility powers and the emotional challenges of being a young mutant. She's a huge character in the comics, for example in Days of Future Past, but was underused in the movies. Plot. The movie would have been a mix of action and drama, focusing on Kitty's journey as she steps away from the X-Men team and faces a personal crisis. She'd battle enemies and work through her inner dilemmas, while also exploring the consequences of being one of the most powerful mutants, yet feeling like an outsider. Why it got canceled. The movie never came to be due to shifting priorities. After Disney bought Fox, plans changed, and the focus moved to reworking the entire X-Men universe for the MCU. Kitty Pryde's movie was one of the casualties of that shift, even though fans had high hopes for it. 23rd, X-Men Nightcrawler, solo movie. The Nightcrawler movie would have been a solo project for Kurt Wagner, one of the most iconic X-Men mutants. The character had an epic appearance in X2 X-Men United, featuring one of the movie's best action scenes, but we never got to see him again on the big screen. However, around 2011, a solo film idea for Nightcrawler was pitched, and this version of the character would have been set in the X-Men First Class timeline with a detailed and faithful origin story. Plot. The movie would focus on Nightcrawler's origin, showing how he grew up in a circus before being hunted as a monster due to his appearance, and his journey to acceptance as a hero. Nightcrawler would also have to face deep questions about faith, loyalty, and his teleportation ability, which often lands him in dangerous situations. The film would be a mix of action and emotional depth, exploring the inner dilemmas of a hero living in a world that sees him as a monster. Why it got canceled. The Nightcrawler solo movie was canceled for several reasons, including a lack of focus on developing characters like Nightcrawler compared to other more popular ones, like Wolverine or Professor X. Additionally, the movie was being planned during a time of major changes for Fox, with the release of X-Men First Class and a shift in the franchise's direction. When Disney acquired the X-Men rights, they didn't see the need to continue with the project, opting instead to reimagine the character within the new MCU mutant universe. X-23 Logan sequel. For a long time, a Logan sequel was being considered. To wrap up our list, let's talk about one of these ideas, a movie focused on the character Laura Kinney. The the mutant who's basically a female version of Wolverine. The film would have been a continuation of the success of Logan, 2017, exploring Laura's journey as she tries to find her place in the world. The movie never made it past the concept stage, and Fox soon dropped the idea, but originally, they wanted to continue Laura's journey after Logan's death. The focus would have been on her dealing with her grief, learning how to navigate the world alone, and trying to control her anger and powers while looking up to her adoptive father. Plot: the movie would have been a continuation of Logan, following Laura Kinney as she tries to find her place in the world after Wolverine's death. The story would delve into her personal journey, her fears, and how she grapples with the legacy of her adoptive father. It would be a tale of self-discovery, full of action and emotional tension. Why it got canceled. Even though Laura Kinney was a popular character among fans, the movie was canceled due to the restructuring of the X-Men franchise following Disney's acquisition. Marvel decided to integrate Laura into future films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they didn't continue with her solo project that had been developed under Fox. The character even appeared in Deadpool and Logan, just like many other characters from this list. And that's the list of mutant movies and series that never saw the light of day. As you can see, many of these projects had interesting concepts, but due to studio direction changes, acquisitions, and creative shifts, they never got released. However, now that the X-Men rights are back at Marvel, who knows what the future holds for the mutants, right? Stay tuned, because the mutant universe might be more alive than ever now within the MCU. But let me know in the comments, nerds, which canceled project from this list would you have loved to see?